The dense alien forest glowed faintly in the dim light of twin moons. Jonas Hale adjusted the visor of his environmental suit, the HUD casting soft blue light over his rugged features. Every step through the strange, moss-like terrain released tiny motes of bioluminescent spores into the air, painting the world with an ethereal glow. The distress beacon he'd tracked to this planet had grown louder, pulsing steadily on his wrist monitor. "This better not be another automated probe," Jonas muttered to himself, brushing a low-hanging vine out of his way. He paused to survey the area, his hand resting on the grip of his multi-tool. The forest was alive with alien sounds. Chirps, rustling leaves, and a low hum that seemed to resonate from the very ground. He had heard of planets like this, ancient, untouched ecosystems, teeming with both wonders and dangers. The signal drew him forward, leading him toward a clearing. As he approached, his sharp eyes caught movement, a flash of silver and blue against the green. He stopped short, his heart pounding. There, slumped against the trunk of a massive, glowing tree, was a humanoid figure. Jonas moved cautiously, raising his hand. "Hello? Are you the source of the distress beacon?" The figure stirred weakly, a soft, melodic voice reaching him in fragments. "Help, please." As Jonas stepped closer, the sight before him left him breathless. She was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Her skin shimmered in hues of cerulean, as if kissed by moonlight, and her eyes, large, luminous, and silver, seemed to pierce into his soul. Her breathing was shallow and her form trembled with exhaustion. "Human," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jonas crouched beside her, his professional instincts taking over. "Stay with me. I'm here to help. Can you move?" She shook her head weakly, wincing in pain. Jonas noticed claw marks raking across her shoulder and down her side, oozing a strange, iridescent fluid. "Damn," he muttered, pulling his medical kit from his pack. "Looks like something had a go at you." Her gaze locked onto his, filled with both fear and relief. Predators. They come back. Jonas glanced over his shoulder, his hand instinctively reaching for his multi-tool. The forest was unnervingly silent now, the chirps and hums replaced by an oppressive stillness. "Great," he said under his breath. "We need to move before whatever attacked you decides to finish the job." She struggled to sit up, her trembling arms barely holding her weight. Jonas knelt beside her, his voice soft but firm. "Easy. Let me do the heavy lifting." She hesitated, but when he slipped an arm under her shoulders and another beneath her knees, she didn't resist. Her weight was lighter than he expected, as if her body were adapted to a lower gravity environment. As he lifted her, a soft hum filled the air, and he realized it was coming from her. "Is that you?" he asked, glancing down at her. She blinked slowly, her voice faint. "A survival instinct. Calms. Prey." Jonas frowned. "Well, it's working, but let's save the serenade for later." She gave the faintest hint of a smile before her head rested against his chest. The trek back to his ship was tense. Jonas's eyes darted between the shadows, his muscles taut with anticipation. Vera, she had whispered her name to him between labored breaths, clung to him as best she could, her crystalline skin cool against his suit. As they approached the edge of the forest, a guttural growl froze him in his tracks. Slowly, he turned his head to see two creatures slinking out from the underbrush. They were massive, quadrupedal beasts with glowing eyes and razor-sharp claws that matched the marks on Vera's body. Jonas shifted his grip on Vera. "Stay calm," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. The creatures circled, their movements predatory and precise. Jonas's multi-tool buzzed to life in his free hand, emitting a sharp beam of light. He aimed it at the nearest creature, forcing it to recoil. "Back off," he growled. The second beast lunged, and Jonas sidestepped, narrowly avoiding its snapping jaws. He shifted Vera's weight, adrenaline pumping through his veins. With a swift motion, he activated the multi-tool's plasma blade, its energy crackling in the air. The creatures hesitated, snarling, before retreating into the shadows. "Not today," Jonas muttered, his grip tightening on Vera. By the time they reached the Odyssey, Jonas was drenched in sweat, his arms aching from carrying her. He laid Vera gently onto a medbay bed, her breathing shallow but steady. "You're safe now," he said, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Let's patch you up. Vera's eyes fluttered open, her gaze meeting his. You saved me. Jonas gave her a crooked smile. That's kind of my job. Besides, you owe me answers, Vera. Who are you and why were you out there alone? Her lips parted, but before she could respond, she winced in pain. Jonas placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. Rest, he said. We'll talk later. First, let's make sure you survive the night. As he worked to clean her wounds, Vera watched him with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. For the first time in a long while, she felt hope, a fragile, flickering light that Jonas Hale had somehow reignited. The hum of the med bay was the only sound as Jonas leaned against the console, arms crossed, watching Vera stir awake. Her silver eyes fluttered open, scanning her surroundings. For a moment she seemed disoriented, her gaze darting to the medical equipment and then to Jonas. Welcome back to the land of the living, Jonas said, his voice laced with dry humor. You've had a rough night. Vera pushed herself up on one elbow, wincing. Where am I? My ship, the Odyssey. You're lucky I was nearby when your distress beacon went off. Jonas stepped closer, his rugged face set with curiosity. Now your turn to talk. Who are you and why did I find you half dead in an alien jungle? Vera hesitated, her crystalline skin catching the soft medbay lights. I am Vera, a scientist. My mission has failed. Failed how? Jonas asked, pulling a stool closer to sit beside her. She sighed, the sound heavy with sorrow. My people, we are dying. Our genetics have stagnated over millennia, and we are no longer able to adapt to the changes in our environment. I was sent to find a solution, a species whose genetic code could merge with ours and save us from extinction. Jonas raised an eyebrow. And you thought humanity might be the answer? I knew, Vera corrected, her voice soft but certain. Your species is unique among the stars. Adaptive, resilient, unpredictable. I had heard of humans, but I never expected to meet one. Jonas leaned back, processing her words. So, you've been out here hunting for some kind of genetic savior? Hunting is not the right word, Vera said, frowning. I sought a partner, a chance to unite our strengths. But the predators of that planet nearly ended my journey before it could begin. Jonas rubbed his temples, exhaling slowly. That's a lot to take in. You're telling me you've traveled across the galaxy because you think humans can save your species? Vera's luminous eyes locked onto his. Yes, and you may be the only one who can help me. Jonas paced the medbay, his boots clicking against the metallic floor. This is insane. You're asking me to what? Give you a DNA sample and hope it fixes everything? It is not that simple, Vera said, sitting up straighter despite her obvious discomfort. Our biology is highly advanced but fragile. Integrating human genetics requires careful study and collaboration. I cannot do this alone. Jonas stopped and turned to face her. What makes you so sure humans are the answer? We're not exactly the most peaceful species out there. Vera's expression softened. Your imperfections are your strength. Conflict and chaos have driven your evolution, forcing you to adapt and thrive where others would perish. My people once looked down on such traits, but now I see their value. Jonas let out a dry chuckle. You make us sound like cockroaches. Vera tilted her head, puzzled. Cockroaches? Never mind. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right, say I believe you. What exactly do you need from me? Vera hesitated, her voice quieter now. Your knowledge, your insight into human biology, and your trust. This is not a decision I can force upon you. If you choose to help me, it must be willingly. Jonas studied her, his sharp blue eyes narrowing. Trust, huh? You're asking a lot from someone who found you bleeding in the dirt? I understand your hesitation, Vera said, her voice steady. But if you help me, you won't just save my people. You'll be shaping the future of two civilizations. Jonas let her words hang in the air, the weight of them pressing down on him. Finally, he nodded. Fine, I'll help you. But on one condition, no more secrets. If we're doing this, I need the full story, Vera. No holding back. A flicker of relief crossed her face. Agreed. Later that evening, they worked together in the ship's lab. Vera provided samples of her genetic code, her delicate hands steady as she manipulated the equipment. Jonas, still skeptical but curious, analyzed the data. "This is incredible," he admitted, his tone grudging. "Your DNA is like nothing I've ever seen. It's almost alive." "It is," Vera said softly, standing beside him. "Our genetic material is symbiotic in nature, designed to harmonize with compatible hosts. But that harmony has made us vulnerable. Without external diversity, we are collapsing." Jonas glanced at her. "And you think humans are compatible?" "I am certain," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. Jonas leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "Well, Vera, it looks like you've got your work cut out for you. If we're going to save your people, we'll need to think fast. Your kind doesn't exactly sound like they have time to waste." "Thank you," Vera said, her voice almost a whisper. "I will not forget this." Jonas gave her a crooked smile. "Just don't let those predators near me again, and we'll call it even." For the first time since their meeting, Vera laughed, a soft, musical sound that lingered in the air. Despite himself, Jonas felt a flicker of hope. The Odyssey's main conference room buzzed with tension. Jonas stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, facing the small but skeptical crew he called his team. Vera sat beside him, her luminous eyes scanning the room, wary yet dignified. "You brought her aboard without consulting any of us," Captain Elaine Carter said, her voice sharp. "We don't know anything about her species, her intentions, or what she's capable of. For all we know, this could be a trap." "She's not a threat," Jonas said firmly. "I found her on the brink of death, for crying out loud. Her species is dying, and we might be their last chance. At least hear her out." Lieutenant Gregson, the ship's engineer, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "And how do we know she's not lying?" "All we've got is her word." Jonas shot him a glare. "Maybe because I've spent the last 2 days analyzing her biology and listening to her story. She's legit. And if she weren't, why would she risk her life to activate that distress beacon?" "Let her speak for herself," Dr. Rena Vargas, the ship's medic, interjected, her tone calmer than the others. Vera straightened in her seat, her crystalline skin catching the artificial light. "I understand your suspicions," she began, her voice melodic yet steady. "I would likely feel the same in your position. But I assure you, my intentions are genuine. My people are on the verge of extinction. We are a once advanced species reduced to desperation, searching for a solution that only your kind can provide." "And what do you want from us exactly?" Captain Carter asked, narrowing her eyes. Vera hesitated, glancing at Jonas, who gave her a subtle nod. "I seek knowledge of your genetic adaptability. Your species' ability to evolve and survive under extreme conditions is unparalleled. By studying your DNA, I hope to find a way to save my people from collapse." The room fell silent, the crew exchanging uneasy glances. "Sounds like she wants to play God," Gregson muttered. Jonas slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! She's asking for help, not stealing it. If any of you have a better plan for dealing with an entire species on the brink of extinction, I'm all ears." Carter sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Jonas, you've always been the bleeding heart, but this is bigger than one alien. If her people are as advanced as she claims, they could be hiding agendas we can't even comprehend." Jonas leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "And what if they're not? What if this is exactly what it looks like? A chance to save lives. Isn't that what we signed up for when we left Earth?" Later, back in the lab, Jonas paced while Vera worked at the analysis console. Her hands moved deftly, her focus unwavering despite the earlier confrontation. "You didn't have to defend me like that," Vera said without looking up. Jonas stopped, folding his arms. "Of course I did. They don't know you like I do." Her gaze lifted to meet his. "And do you know me?" He hesitated, caught off guard by her question. "I know enough. I know you're not the enemy, and I know you're trying to do the right thing." She smiled faintly. "That means more than you know." "Don't mention it," Jonas said, though he felt the weight of her gratitude settle between them. "Anyway, we've got work to do. Let's focus on making this project something even Carter can't argue with." Vera nodded, her attention returning to the console. Your crew, they are loyal to you. Jonas snorted. Loyal might be pushing it. They trust me, most of the time. I've been with them long enough to earn that much at least. Trust is rare, Vera said softly, especially in matters of survival. My people, we lost that long ago. Jonas frowned. What happened? She hesitated before answering, her voice laced with sorrow. Our advancements made us arrogant. We conquered disease, hunger, even death for a time. But in doing so, we forgot how to struggle, how to adapt. When the world began to change, we couldn't. Jonas leaned against the console, studying her. And now you think humans are the missing piece? Vera met his gaze, her silver eyes unwavering. I do. Not just for our genetics, but for your spirit, your ability to overcome. Jonas let her words sink in before straightening. Well, if that's what you're banking on, we've got a lot of work to do. Let's prove them wrong together. Vera nodded, her determination renewed. Together. The two of them spent hours in the lab, working side by side. Vera explained her people's genetic makeup, and Jonas provided insights into human adaptability. For the first time in days, the tension between them eased, replaced by a sense of shared purpose. As the hours stretched into the night, Jonas leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. You know, Vera, you're not so bad for someone who's about 3 steps ahead of the rest of us on the evolutionary ladder. Vera tilted her head, a smile playing at her lips. And you are not so bad for a species that thrives on chaos. Jonas chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. The lab fell quiet, the soft hum of equipment filling the space as they worked. For the first time since Vera had arrived, Jonas felt a flicker of hope, not just for her people, but for the unlikely partnership they were building. The sterile white light of the lab illuminated the tired but determined faces of Jonas and Vera. They'd spent days refining their experiment, testing compatibility between human and alien genetic material. Jonas leaned over the console, his brows furrowed in concentration, while Vera monitored the results on a nearby screen. Hold that sample steady, Vera instructed, her melodic voice breaking the silence. Jonas grinned wryly, holding a thin vial with one steady hand. I'm not a rookie, Vera. Give me some credit. Vera's lips curved into a small smile. You are a quick learner, Jonas Hale. That is one of your more admirable traits. Jonas chuckled. Don't flatter me too much. I might start thinking I'm indispensable. You already think that, she quipped, her tone light but teasing. Jonas laughed, setting the vial carefully into the centrifuge. Fair point. What's the status on your end? Vera's hands danced over the console, adjusting the parameters of their latest trial. This sequence shows promise. The reaction between our genetic samples is stable, but what? Jonas stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. She sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. The integration is slow. Even with perfect compatibility, the process would take generations to manifest. My people do not have that long. Jonas scratched his head, his jaw tightening. Then we need to think outside the box. If time's the problem, maybe we can accelerate the process. Use nanotechnology or... Vera turned to him, her silver eyes glowing with hope. You would help me with this? He met her gaze, his expression softening. I said I'd help, didn't I? Besides, I've never been good at leaving a problem half solved. She smiled, a rare warmth lighting her features. You truly are unlike anyone I have ever met, Jonas Hale. As they worked late into the night, the tension between them eased. Jonas explained the intricacies of human biology with a mix of scientific precision and wry humor, while Vera countered with her advanced knowledge and subtle sarcasm. So, let me get this straight, Jonas said, leaning back against the console. Your people figured out how to stop aging but didn't think about the consequences? It was short-sighted, Vera admitted, her voice tinged with regret. We prioritized stability over adaptability. It made us strong for millennia, but left us vulnerable to change. Jonas shook his head. Sounds like a cautionary tale. Humans aren't exactly great at thinking ahead either, but at least we've got variety on our side. Variety and chaos, Vera said with a faint smile. Hey, chaos gets results, Jonas shot back, grinning. They fell into a comfortable silence, the hum of the lab equipment filling the space. For the first time, Jonas felt a strange sense of camaraderie with Vera, a connection that went beyond their work. Hours later, Vera's console emitted a soft chime, signaling the completion of their latest simulation. She leaned forward, her silver eyes scanning the results. It worked, she breathed, her voice filled with wonder. The sequence is stable. Jonas leaned over her shoulder, his breath brushing against her hair. You're kidding. See for yourself, she said, stepping aside to give him a better view. Jonas studied the data, a slow grin spreading across his face. Damn, we might actually pull this off. Vera turned to him, her expression both hopeful and serious. This is only the beginning, Jonas. The next step, it will require more than simulations. Jonas straightened, meeting her gaze. You're talking about field testing, aren't you? Yes, Vera said, her voice steady. To fully integrate the sequence, we need a live subject, someone willing to take the risk. Jonas frowned, his mind racing. That's not a small ask, Vera. If something goes wrong, I know the risks, she said softly. But without this step, my people are doomed. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Let me think about it. Later, in the quiet of the Odyssey's observation deck, Jonas stared out at the endless expanse of stars. Vera joined him, her presence quiet but grounding. You're asking me to take a hell of a leap, Jonas said without looking at her. I would not ask if it were not necessary, Vera replied, her voice gentle. He turned to her, his blue eyes searching hers. Why me, Vera? Out of all the people in the galaxy, why does this fall to me? She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. Because you are the only one who has ever believed in me, and because I trust you, Jonas Hale. For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of her words hanging between them. Finally Jonas nodded, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Guess we'd better not screw this up, then. Vera smiled, a rare and genuine expression. Together, we will succeed. The Odyssey hummed softly as it cruised through the uncharted expanse of space. Jonas sat in the lab, hunched over a console, reviewing the final set of data. Vera stood nearby, her crystalline features illuminated by the glow of the monitors. So, this is it, Jonas muttered, his voice thick with a mix of anticipation and doubt. We've run the simulations a dozen times. Every model says it should work, but there's no way to know for sure until we take the risk, Vera finished for him. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Jonas, you have done more for me and my people than I ever could have imagined. Whatever happens, I am grateful. He glanced up at her, his sharp blue eyes meeting her luminous silver ones. Let's not start with the goodbyes just yet. We've got a long way to go before we're breaking out the champagne. Champagne? Vera tilted her head, intrigued. Jonas chuckled. It's a drink. Humans use it to celebrate. Remind me to introduce you to it once we've saved your species. Vera smiled faintly. I will hold you to that. The ship's crew gathered in the command center for a briefing. Jonas stood at the front, a holographic projection of their plan hovering beside him. Here's the deal, he began, addressing the small group. We've developed a genetic integration process that could stabilize Vera's species and stop their decline. But the only way to confirm it works is with a live trial. That's where I come in. You're volunteering? Dr. Rena Vargas asked, her tone incredulous. Jonas nodded. I've been working closely with Vera on this project. If anyone's going to test it, it should be me. Captain Carter frowned, her arms crossed. Jonas, you're the only one here who trusts her. You realize what you're putting on the line? I do, Jonas said firmly. But if this works, it's worth the risk. Vera's people are out of time, and we're their only shot. Gregson leaned forward, his expression skeptical. What happens if it doesn't work? We could lose you, Jonas, and this whole mission could go sideways. Jonas turned to Vera, who stepped forward to address the crew. I understand your concerns, she said, her voice calm but earnest. But Jonas is right. This is our best chance. If we succeed, we can prevent the extinction of an entire civilization. If we fail, she hesitated, her gaze flickering to Jonas. We will face that outcome together. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over the crew. Finally, Captain Carter nodded. All right, Jonas, if you're sure about this, we'll back your play, but don't make me regret it. Back in the lab, Jonas and Vera prepared for the procedure. The equipment hummed softly as Vera calibrated the genetic integration chamber. You ready for this? Jonas asked, his tone light but serious. I should be asking you that, Vera replied, glancing at him. You are the one taking the greater risk. Jonas shrugged, a crooked grin tugging at his lips. I've done crazier things, besides, I trust you. Her hands paused over the controls and she looked at him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. Thank you, Jonas, for your trust, your courage, and your humanity. He swallowed, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Don't make me regret it, Vera. She smiled faintly. I will not. The procedure began with Jonas lying in the integration chamber, the faint glow of the machine surrounding him. Vera monitored the process, her hands moving deftly over the controls. Heart rate stable, she said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. Genetic markers are aligning. Jonas grimaced as a wave of heat surged through his body. You sure this is supposed to feel like getting hit by a lightning bolt? It is an expected side effect, Vera replied, her tone almost apologetic. The process is intense, but your body's adapting. Good to know, Jonas muttered, his knuckles white as he gripped the sides of the chamber. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the integration progressed. Vera's eyes never left the monitors, her focus unwavering. Genetic sequence stabilized, she announced finally, relief evident in her voice. Jonas exhaled sharply, his body relaxing as the machine powered down. Well, that wasn't so bad, he said with a weak grin. Vera helped him out of the chamber, her hands steadying him. How do you feel? Like I ran a marathon through a sandstorm, Jonas admitted, but his tone was light. Did it work? Vera scanned the results, her expression a mix of awe and hope. It worked. The integration is complete. Jonas grinned, despite the exhaustion weighing on him. Told you chaos gets results. Vera laughed softly, the sound like a gentle melody. You continue to surprise me, Jonas Hale. The Odyssey was quieter than usual, the crew subdued after the monumental step Jonas and Vera had taken. Jonas sat in the mess hall, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. His muscles ached and his mind buzzed with the implications of the successful genetic integration. You look like hell, Lieutenant Gregson said, sliding into the seat across from him. Jonas smirked, taking a slow sip of his drink. Thanks for the pep talk, Gregson. Really uplifting. Gregson leaned forward, his usual skepticism tempered by curiosity. Seriously, though, how do you feel? You just rewrote a chunk of your DNA. That's not exactly a nap and a snack kind of recovery. Jonas rolled his shoulder, wincing slightly. It's weird. I feel the same but different, you know? Like something shifted, but I can't put my finger on it. Gregson raised an eyebrow. And you're okay with that? Jonas leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Honestly, yeah. If it means helping Vera's people, I'd do it again. Gregson snorted. You're either the bravest guy I know or the dumbest. Maybe both. Jonas grinned. I'll take that as a compliment. Meanwhile, in the lab, Vera meticulously reviewed the post-integration data. Her silver eyes scanned the screens, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She looked up when Jonas entered, his presence filling the room with an easy energy. Shouldn't you be resting? She asked, tilting her head. Rest is overrated, Jonas replied, leaning against the counter. What's the verdict? Am I still me? Vera's lips curved into a small smile. You are very much still you. The integration was successful. Your body has adapted remarkably well. Good to know, Jonas said, his tone light. So what's next? Vera hesitated, her expression growing serious. The data from your integration will allow us to create a viable template for my people, but the process must be tested on a larger scale. Jonas crossed his arms, his brows furrowing. You're saying we need more volunteers? Yes, Vera said softly. If we are to save my species, we must act quickly. Every passing day brings us closer to extinction. Jonas exhaled, running a hand through his hair. That's not going to be an easy sell. People don't usually line up to be genetic guinea pigs. I know, Vera said, her voice laced with regret. But without their help, my people have no future. Jonas stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. We'll figure it out, Vera. Together. Her gaze met his, a flicker of hope lighting her features. You have an uncanny ability to inspire confidence, Jonas Hale. He chuckled. Must be my winning personality. Later in the ship's conference room, Jonas and Vera presented their findings to the crew. The holographic display showed the integration process in vivid detail, highlighting the potential benefits and risks. This is where we stand, Jonas said, addressing the group. We've proven the process works. Now we need to take the next step. That means finding people willing to undergo the procedure. Captain Carter leaned back in her chair, her expression skeptical. You're asking us to volunteer? Not just you, Vera interjected. We will seek volunteers from other human settlements. Anyone willing to help us will be given full disclosure of the risks and benefits. And what's the guarantee this won't backfire? Gregson asked, his tone sharp. There are no guarantees, Jonas said firmly, but we've come this far. We've already made the impossible possible. This is a chance to do something bigger than ourselves. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the crew. Finally, Captain Carter nodded. All right, let's get to work. As the crew dispersed, Vera approached Jonas, her expression unreadable. You have a gift, Jonas, she said softly. For what? Talking people into crazy ideas? For hope, she replied, her silver eyes shimmering. You give it freely, even when others doubt. That is a rare and precious thing. Jonas smiled, his gaze steady. Maybe. Or maybe I just hate seeing people give up when there's still a chance to fight. Vera stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. It is more than that. You see the best in others, even when they do not see it themselves. Jonas felt a warmth spread through his chest, the sincerity in her words striking a chord. Thanks, Vera. That means a lot. She smiled, a rare and genuine expression. And you mean a lot to me, Jonas Hale. For a moment they stood in silence, the unspoken connection between them growing stronger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Jonas knew they would face them together. The Odyssey drifted through the stars, its engines humming steadily as it moved toward the human colony where Jonas and Vera hoped to find their first volunteer. The silence of space felt different now, heavy with the weight of their mission and the bond between them that had grown ever stronger in recent days. Jonas stood in front of the observation window, gazing out into the vastness of the cosmos. The stars were beautiful, but they also felt distant, like a reminder of how isolated he and Vera were in their pursuit. He hadn't been this invested in a cause in a long time. It felt different. You've been quiet, Vera's voice broke through the stillness, and Jonas turned to find her standing behind him. Her silver eyes were softer than usual, her face more open. Jonas shrugged, a half-smile tugging at his lips. Just thinking about what's next. Do you doubt what we're doing? Her voice was gentle, but there was an underlying edge of worry there. Jonas shook his head. No, it's just, I didn't think I'd ever be in a position like this. Helping save an entire species? That's a hell of a thing. Vera stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. I've never met a human like you. You carry the weight of this mission with such conviction. I admire that. Jonas felt a warmth spread through him at her words, a soft smile crossing his face. I'm just doing what needs to be done. No more, no less. He paused, then added with a teasing grin. Besides, someone has to keep you on track. Vera smiled, her gaze softening. I would never lose my way with you by my side. The words hit Jonas harder than he expected, but he brushed it off, not ready to delve into the feelings stirring within him. He had always been a pragmatist, but this was different. Vera wasn't just an ally anymore. There was something deeper, a growing connection between them that neither of them had fully acknowledged. All right, Jonas said, shaking off his thoughts. Let's focus on the task at hand. We're almost at the colony. Are you ready? Vera nodded, her expression hardening with determination. I'm ready. For my people. They both turned toward the door, heading to the ship's command center. As the Odyssey approached the colony, the crew worked with precision, preparing for the delicate task of finding volunteers willing to undergo the genetic integration. Jonas and Vera stood together at the front of the room as Captain Carter gave them the final rundown of the plan. Volunteers will be coming aboard, Carter said, her tone businesslike. We'll need to be prepared for questions, but we've got to keep the details to a minimum. The fewer people who know the risks, the better. Jonas frowned. That's a fine line to walk, Captain. We can't promise people they're safe if we're not sure. I know, Hale, Captain Carter replied, her voice steady. But we can't afford to waste time. If the volunteers know too much, they might hesitate. We need them to act quickly, to trust us. Vera looked at Jonas, her silver eyes reflecting uncertainty. Jonas met her gaze, giving her a reassuring nod. Trust is the key, Vera. We've got this. Later, when the volunteers arrived, the tension was palpable. Jonas and Vera greeted them in the sterile, brightly lit medical bay. The group of 5 humans was hesitant, each of them looking at the 2 of them with a mix of curiosity and fear. I'm Dr. Hale, Jonas said, stepping forward. This is Vera. We're here to help, but we need your trust. What we're offering is not without risk, but it's the only chance we have to save a civilization. If you're willing to help us, you'll be part of something that could change everything. A tall man in his 40s stepped forward, his face set in determination. What's the catch? There's no catch, Vera answered quickly, her voice calm. Just the chance to save countless lives. The procedure will integrate human and alien DNA, a process that could cure a species that is dying. A woman in her 30s shook her head, skeptical. And you expect us to just sign up for this? No questions asked? Jonas stepped in, his voice firm but empathetic. We can't promise it's going to be painless. We can't promise everything will go perfectly. But what I can promise is that you'll be part of something bigger. This is your chance to make a difference. We need you. The room fell silent. The volunteers exchanged uneasy glances, clearly weighing the gravity of the decision. Finally, the man who had spoken before nodded. I'll do it, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. Jonas felt a sense of relief wash over him, and he glanced at Vera, who gave him a small, approving nod. I'll do it too, the woman said, stepping forward. One by one, the others followed, their faces a mix of fear and determination. Jonas and Vera exchanged a look. This was it, the moment they had worked for. But as much as they had prepared, the weight of the decision didn't escape either of them. You're all incredibly brave, Jonas said quietly. Let's get started. The procedure began with Jonas overseeing the integration chamber, ensuring that everything was in place. As the volunteers were prepped, he found himself once again in the quiet space with Vera. You did it, Vera said, her voice low. You convinced them. Jonas shrugged, his tone wry. I don't think they're doing it for me, but it's a start. Vera stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. But it is you who gives them hope, Jonas. You do more than convince. You inspire. Jonas met her gaze, his heart beating a little faster. There was a vulnerability in her voice, a crack in the armor she wore so often. It made something stir within him, a need to protect, to be there for her. But he pushed it down, focusing instead on the task at hand. We're not done yet. Let's see how this works out. Vera nodded, her expression hardening with determination once more. The procedure progressed smoothly, each volunteer stepping into the chamber one by one. Jonas stood by, his hand on the console, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision he had made. This was their only chance, and it was up to him and Vera to ensure it worked. As the final volunteer was integrated, Jonas and Vera shared a brief, quiet moment. We're one step closer, Jonas murmured, glancing at her. Vera smiled, her eyes full of quiet gratitude. Yes, and no matter what happens next, I will never forget this. Jonas nodded, but something in his chest tightened at the finality of her words. He wasn't sure if it was the mission or if it was something more personal, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that the stakes had just gotten higher, for both of them. The Odyssey drifted in the shadow of the distant star, its engines humming with the steady rhythm of a ship at rest. The crew had done everything they could to prepare for the procedure, Each volunteer had been integrated, the genetic data collected, and the analysis was underway. Yet, despite the quiet success of their efforts, Jonas couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Jonas sat at the command center, his hands on the controls, staring at the holographic display showing the latest results of the genetic integration. The volunteers had all undergone the procedure, and initial signs were promising. However, as the data scrolled past, his mind raced with questions. Vera entered, her footsteps light but determined. She paused next to him, her silver eyes scanning the same data. "The results look positive," she said quietly, though Jonas could hear the concern beneath her calm tone. "They do," he replied, not looking up from the screen. "But I'm not sure I trust it yet. Something's off." Vera frowned, stepping closer. "Off how?" Jonas turned to face her, his eyes locking with hers. "The gene sequences are showing some unexpected mutations. Minor, but enough to be concerning. They're not settling as we anticipated." Vera's expression hardened. "Are you saying the procedure didn't work?" "No," Jonas said quickly. "Not exactly, but I'm worried it's more complicated than we thought. The mutations could cause an unstable reaction down the line. I need to run a deeper analysis." Vera studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Do what you need to, but we don't have much time. The volunteers are already starting to show signs of improvement. We can't risk losing that momentum." Jonas exhaled, frustration creasing his brow. "I know, but if we're too hasty, it could backfire. If I'm wrong, we might be jeopardizing everything." Vera placed a hand on his shoulder, a grounding touch. "I trust you, Jonas. We've come this far. We will see this through." Jonas looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity there. It gave him a strange comfort, but also added to the pressure. He had never wanted to fail, but now, with the weight of an entire species' survival on his shoulders, the stakes had never been higher. "I won't fail," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. As hours passed, Jonas worked tirelessly in the lab, analyzing the data and cross-checking the volunteers' reactions. Despite his best efforts, the discrepancies remained. Vera kept close, offering support in her quiet, unwavering way, but even she couldn't dispel the growing sense of dread Jonas felt. "Jonas," she said softly, interrupting his concentration, "you've been at this for hours. You need to rest." "I can't." "Not yet," he replied, his voice strained. "There's still too much to process. I need to figure out what's going wrong before it's too late." Vera's voice was gentle but firm. "You can't fix this on your own. We need a plan, not just data." Jonas glanced at her, frustration bubbling up. "You think I don't know that? But I'm telling you, this could be catastrophic if we don't get it right. We're dealing with alien biology. I can't just assume things will work out." Vera stepped closer, her presence a calming influence, even as the tension in the room thickened. "I know you're scared. We both are. But the only way forward is together. You don't have to do this alone." Jonas looked into her eyes, seeing the raw honesty in her gaze. She was right. He couldn't carry the burden of this alone. He had always been a lone wolf, but now, with Vera by his side, it was time to trust in something greater than himself. "Together," he muttered, his voice soft. Vera smiled, her expression warm but serious. "That's right." She sat next to him at the console, and together they combed through the data, piece by piece. There was something about her presence, steady, unyielding, that helped Jonas focus. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge from the chaos of numbers and genetic sequences. "I think I found it," Jonas said, his voice sharp with realization. "The mutations aren't random. They're triggered by a specific enzyme release in the integration process. It's not an error. It's a reaction to the alien DNA. We just need to adjust the serum levels." Vera leaned in closer, her face illuminated by the glow of the holographic screens. "So it's not failure?" Jonas shook his head. "No, it's just a complication. We need to tweak the process to account for the alien gene response." Her expression softened with relief. "That's good news, Jonas." Jonas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Good news, yeah, but we're not out of the woods yet." Later that evening, Jonas and Vera stood together in the observation deck, watching as the stars outside passed by in a blur of light. The atmosphere was quieter now, the sense of impending doom replaced with cautious optimism. You did it, Vera said, her voice low but full of admiration. You found the solution. Jonas smiled, but it was tinged with exhaustion. We did it. Together. Vera turned to face him, her eyes full of gratitude. I couldn't have done this without you. Jonas met her gaze, his heart suddenly racing. There was something more in her words, something that went beyond the success of their mission. His pulse quickened as he stepped closer, the air between them charged with unspoken emotion. Vera, he began, his voice thick with 1,000 unsaid things. She didn't let him finish. Instead, she reached up, her hand resting on his chest, her touch light but firm. I know, she whispered. I feel it too. The moment hung in the air between them, raw and fragile. The connection they shared, forged through shared struggle and mutual respect, was undeniable now. It was more than just a partnership. It was something deeper, more personal. Jonas hesitated for only a heartbeat before he leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, but quickly grew deeper as the floodgates of emotion opened. Vera's arms wound around him, pulling him closer as the kiss deepened, their bodies pressing together as if drawn by an unseen force. For the first time, Jonas let himself feel everything he had been holding back: the fear, the hope, the tension, and the undeniable chemistry between them. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and wide-eyed, Jonas placed his forehead against hers. We're in this together, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Vera nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the same uncertainty and resolve. Yes, together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Jonas didn't feel alone. He wasn't sure where this would lead, whether it was the success of their mission or something more. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to face it without Vera by his side. And for now, that was enough.